You probably think ChatGPT is a magical, free assistant getting smarter every single day to benefit humanity. It's not. It's actually getting worse. OpenAI is burning through billions of dollars, and their brilliant survival plan involves downgrading free users, locking the real model behind a $200 paywall, and turning your conversations into ad space. So if it's felt off lately, it's probably not in your head. They hope most people wouldn't notice the shift, and that's the point. But that free AI assistant, it's already dead. Chapter 1. The $5 billion dumpster fire. OpenAI is in trouble. Documents show the company missed nearly every internal target it set for itself this year. Revenue goals? Missed. Weekly active user benchmarks? Missed. Even the IPO timeline, once framed as a victory lap, now looks more like a high-pressure sprint with no clear finish line. According to reporting from the Wall Street Journal in April 2026, the numbers paint a far less polished picture than the public narrative suggests. A $5 billion loss against $3.7 billion in revenue for 2024. The math doesn't lie. They earned $3.7 billion, and they lost $5 billion. For every dollar the company brings in, it spends $2.35. The Wall Street Journal also indicates CFO Sarah Fryer has flagged serious concerns about funding the next wave of multi-billion-dollar data center commitments, especially if growth even only slightly wobbles. But according to OpenAI, it's all part of the scaling toward AGI. And despite the red flags, Wall Street is still largely on board. $5 billion in losses works out to roughly $13.7 million per day. Spread out across an entire year, that's about $9,500 every minute. Blink and roughly $160 is gone. Executives aren't volunteering their stock options. Venture capitalists who've already poured in tens of billions aren't eager for another top-up round. Microsoft has even started asking pointed questions on earnings calls, which leaves one increasingly exposed group: you. Chapter 2. Lobotomizing the free tier. ChatGPT was never free. It was subsidized heavily and deliberately by one of the biggest funding machines in tech. The backers behind it reads like a who's who of late-stage venture capital: Microsoft, SoftBank, Thrive Capital, plus Saudi sovereign funds. Combined investment reportedly exceeds $60 billion, and at the current burn rates, that doesn't last decades, it lasts years. Eventually, someone has to decide what refilling the tank actually costs. The panic is real, the IPO clock is ticking, and the survival plan that they've cooked up is desperate. It was to make ChatGPT seem the same, while quietly changing what powers it. Essentially, it became dumber. There's a mechanism that users don't really see called capacity-based fallback. During peak hours or after invisible daily quotas, users get silently rerouted from the flagship model to cheaper mini variants. The handoff is invisible, the quality drop is not. After roughly 10 messages every 5 hours on the strong model, your conversation collapses mid-sentence into generic autocomplete mode. User telemetry, internal strategy notes, and a parade of Reddit threads all confirm the same thing. Routing queries to smaller models is a deliberate cost control lever. Your AI assistant has been intentionally swapped for a budget version while you stare at a familiar brand name and assume nothing has changed. The savings are huge. Routing queries to smaller models can cost a fraction of a cent versus several cents on a flagship. Multiply that across 800 million weekly active users, and the math starts to make sense. For you, it boils down to paying full attention to a conversation partner who suddenly forgets your last 3 messages and starts answering in fortune cookie aphorisms. Performance gaps are not subtle. Independent testing suggests fallback models struggle with tasks the flagship handles in a single step. Multi-step reasoning breaks down. Code generation starts introducing subtle, hard-to-spot bugs. Long context summarization begins dropping key details. One day, your assistant solves a calculus problem, and the next day, after lunchtime traffic kicks in, it can't count the syllables in a haiku. So this doesn't look random, it looks designed. A free tier that felt like a miracle was in reality a loss leader, and it was propped up by marketing capital and long-term bets that were never meant to last forever. The next shift is already priced in, and it isn't subtle. Chapter 3. The Elite Paywall. Internal pricing memos confirm OpenAI's $20 per month plus tier, once the crown jewel of consumer AI, has been quietly demoted to neglected middle child. Plus subscribers still get something usable, but the frontier intelligence, that is behind a velvet rope. Meet ChatGPT Pro, $200 a month. It has unlimited access to O1 and O1 Pro mode, higher rate limits than Plus, and priority compute when servers are under load. There are also lower error rates on harder reasoning tasks compared to standard tiers. The takeaway is simple: the smarter model now sits behind a paywall. The math gets uncomfortable the longer you stare at it. $200 a month is $2,400 a year per user. A family of 4 wanting access to the same smart tier, that's $9,600 annually. That is more than many households spend on groceries in several months. Reported uptake of the $200 tier sits in the lower single digits of total users, roughly 5 million subscribers worldwide. That's about 0.06%. And meanwhile, frustration from Plus users is building. The strategy is becoming harder to miss, and it's about to reach into places you probably never expected. Chapter 4. Your Chats, brought to you by Carl's Jr. The next version of ChatGPT isn't just smarter or more expensive, it's monetized in a new way. Ads are coming to your AI assistant. And that is not rumor or speculation, it's in OpenAI's own announcement. Advertising is now an official product line, starting with the free tier and a new $8 ChatGPT Go plan rolling out in US beta. Advertisers reportedly face minimum commitments north of $200,000 just to get in the door. Early pricing was high, around $60 per 1,000 views, before being lowered to actually attract buyers. Ads will appear at the bottom of responses and be clearly labeled, for now, because the same company once told a podcast audience that ads in ChatGPT would be a last resort. But apparently that last resort has arrived early. That last resort got a launch plan. The mechanics here are simple and deliberate. Free users see ads. $8 users see fewer or differently formatted ads. $20 users are spared, for now. And $200 users, no ads at all. Same product, different rules. The more you pay, the cleaner and more capable it gets. The real play isn't just ads, it's targeting. Type wedding and you'll be swamped by venues, rings, and honeymoon packages for the next 6 months, because unlike social media, people tell this thing everything. Industry analysts estimate conversational targeting can massively outperform traditional ads, sometimes by multiples, for one simple reason. Nobody tells Instagram their problems, but they tell ChatGPT. Reported figures suggest the ad business is being modeled to generate over $25 billion in annual revenue by 2029. That is a number that would on its own exceed OpenAI's entire current revenue. They have access to your medical questions, relationship doubts, tax confusion, and 3 a.m. searches. That's a marketer's dream wrapped up in a friendly chat bubble. The reason any of this is actually happening comes down to one rival quietly devouring the only segment of the market that actually prints money. Chapter 5. The Anthropic Panic. Industry reporting shows something most people won't see in a headline. Rival firm Anthropic is now generating roughly the same level of annual revenue as OpenAI. Some estimates even put it ahead. The smaller company, the one Sam Altman's former colleagues founded, now generates more annualized revenue than the firm everyone calls the leader. What used to feel like a one-horse race is not anymore. The difference between these two firms is sharp, and it explains the panic. Anthropic runs more like a luxury boutique than a mass-market platform, serving just over 1,000 enterprise clients. Many of them pay in the 7 figures annually, some in the 8. Its flagship model, Claude, has become a major force in enterprise coding, and it's used by Fortune 500 engineering teams, Wall Street, and biotech research groups. These aren't customers sensitive to pricing. At $50 a seat, they don't blink, and that's because the productivity gains often pay for themselves before lunch on day one. OpenAI, meanwhile, is babysitting hundreds of millions of free-tier users. Anthropic extracts more from a single mid-sized enterprise contract than OpenAI does from 1 million casual ChatGPT users combined. Anthropic's niche market creates a very different kind of business. There are higher prices, longer contracts, and lower churn rates. The usage patterns are stable enough to actually forecast. Finance teams can model it. Compare that to OpenAI's consumer scale. It's a constant surge of unpredictable demand from hundreds of millions of users, a system where a small price change could trigger mass cancellations overnight. They are two very different machines. One is optimized for predictability, the other is built for scale and volatility. And in this market, it's not about branding, it's about what gets used. This is why the consumer product starts to look deliberately carved up. The free tier gets restricted to cut compute costs. The middle tier stops being the focus and becomes a funnel into the higher plans. The $200 Pro tier is aimed at users who treat it like a business infrastructure, not a subscription, and the ads are built for everyone who will never pay at that level. And every decision traces to closing the gap on Anthropic, hopefully before the investors start to ask uncomfortable questions about the story. Because if that gap doesn't close, the numbers won't either. And that pressure is starting to show. Chapter 6. The safety team bails. Key members of the safety team, people tasked with preventing the system from behaving unpredictably or dangerously, have been leaving. Not quietly and not slowly. At a pace that should concern anyone treating this like a stable long-term bet. Jan Leike's resignation post is short and very public. His exact phrasing reads like a warning. Safety culture and processes have taken a backseat to shiny products. Leike was the co-lead of an alignment team, a man whose entire job was preventing the technology he was building from causing catastrophic harm. And he was telling everyone that the people who write his paychecks have stopped caring about the part where humanity does not get hurt. But Ilya Sutskever's exit was the warning shot. Sutskever was OpenAI's chief scientist and one of its original founders. He left, founded his own venture aimed squarely at safe superintelligence, and took a chunk of the technical brain trust with him. Leike's departure, which followed shortly after, confirmed the warning shot had not changed a thing. The super alignment team, created to ensure future more powerful AI systems remained under control, has been effectively dissolved. It was originally promised a significant share of internal compute resources, around 20%, to focus on safety research. That didn't last. Members have since left, the computing power has reportedly been redirected toward product development, and what was framed as a core mission now looks, from the outside, like something that's been sidelined. There's a consistent pattern across this exodus. Engineers who joined to build safe, aligned AGI now describe a very different reality. A company whose product decisions are driven by commercial teams, where safety reviews are sped up to meet launch deadlines, and where internal concerns about whistleblower protections reportedly surfaced during the same restructuring period that positioned OpenAI for a potential IPO. The guardrails are gone. The promises around transparency and caution start to feel harder to pin on any one group. What used to be handled by dedicated oversight is now handled by process under pressure. Former employees estimate that the number of people focused on alignment work has dropped sharply over the past 18 months. And the public-facing side of this company, it still moves fast. But some of the most impressive demos, the ones that made the headlines, are now more tightly controlled, delayed, or quietly pushed aside in favor of commercial priorities. And nothing was safe. Chapter 7. The Sora Bait and Switch. Sora went viral in 2024 for its hyper-real clips of things like woolly mammoths walking through snow and eerily realistic city scenes. But even it had a shelf life. In April 2026, it was no longer available as a standalone consumer product. What once looked like a public glimpse of the future has been pulled out of public hands. Internal communications cite excessive compute costs and a strategic pivot toward enterprise tools, agents, and robotics. It all comes down to economics. A single Sora video generation reportedly cost over 1,000 times more in compute than a typical text query. Multiply that by millions of curious users, and it becomes a problem. Hollywood studios, ad agencies, and enterprise media partners still get it at pricing that makes the economics work. But if you are just someone who saw a demo and thought you might like to make a birthday video for your niece, you don't. Industry reporting suggests studio licensing deals are in the $5 million to $20 million annual range depending on the partner. The consumer-facing version that once drove the hype now exists mostly as clips, demos, and memories. And it's not just Sora. Voice features that once felt unlimited are now throttled. Custom GPTs come with tighter limits, and advanced reasoning that was shown freely during hype cycles is increasingly reserved for higher-priced tiers. Over time, the pattern becomes hard to miss. Monetization, not as a side effect, but as the structure itself. It all leads toward one scheduled outcome, and that outcome already has a timeline attached. Chapter 8. The IPO Extraction Machine. Filings reveal OpenAI is restructuring its governance setup as it moves toward a potential public offering on a scale financial press has called unprecedented. The original structure, designed to limit investor profit and protect the mission, is being dismantled. The nonprofit board that once had real control over the company is being pushed to a more advisory role. On paper, the mission hasn't changed, it's still about safe AGI for humanity. But in reality, the system holding that mission in place is being rebuilt from the ground up. The $1 trillion valuation target, repeated in every leaked memo, is the only number that matters. The data doesn't just disappear. Every prompt you've typed, every conversation you've had since 2022, it all feeds the system. And as this moves toward a public market story, that activity gets reframed. In an IPO document, it shows up as engagement or momentum. Strip away that language and it begins to look familiar. It's the same late-stage shift you see across tech platforms. The user stops being just the customer and starts becoming part of the product, not someone being served, something being used. And in the end, the uncomfortable realization, you were never the customer. Chapter 9. Welcome to the AI underclass. So where does that leave you? The golden age of free, powerful, broadly available AI is over. It lasted about 24 months, and it's not coming back. Your daily digital workflow is about to get more expensive and more constrained. What used to feel like free access to intelligence is turning into a tiered system, where better capability sits behind higher prices. And the price for anything that actually works keeps going up. This is the pattern every tech wave hinted at but never made visible. Most people get the base version, and the base version doesn't get better first. It gets cheaper, simpler, and more limited. Access stops being equal, it all becomes allocated. Different people and different levels depending on what they can pay. A version of technology that was supposed to expand access is quietly splitting into tiers. Some people get full capability, most people get enough to stay inside of the system, and over time even that shifts. The promise was a tool that would lift everyone. Now the future of human intelligence is behind a subscription service, and we are being priced out. But inside the companies building this future, something else is happening. The people closest to the system are starting to leave, and it is sending serious shockwaves through Silicon Valley. Find out in why AI researchers are quitting and panicking on the way out. Or watch this video instead.